married Steve, I knew I was signing on to be a minister's wife, and so that's what I've always done. We've always been in ministry, even though he was in the law for a long time. And so Steve was several years ago, 6 years ago or so, Steve was desiring to leave the law and full-time, leave the law and get into full-time ministry. And so we were both praying about it. And so we kind of took the, I just laid out some items like, God, if this is what you want us to do, then let it be like this when we get there. And then I will know, I'll have this proof. And I didn't know it until the drive home after visiting this church for the first time. Steve and I were talking in the van, and he had laid out a similar prayer. And it turns out that God answered his prayer in that proof way that would say, yes, Steve, this is what I want you to do. And God had done that with me as well, and we compared notes, and we felt like, well, this is where we need to go. We're gonna, gonna give up the law, gonna move to this new church, and this is where we're gonna go. So we went, and we knew it would be a hard place. We knew that we would struggle there in some ways because we knew that it probably wasn't the best fit in the world. But I didn't know how much I would struggle after a certain amount of time because of the disconnect that was there when we got there. And also that is the disconnect between what we saw as what our ministry was and what they wanted us to do. And there was a huge disconnect, and it was not a smooth transition. We did not end up staying there very long, but it got extremely painful, and probably more so for me than for Steve. And it turns out that when we got there, our kids were in high school, but they released Steve from this full-time ministry job after we'd been there for 16 months.
Yeah, something like that.
And our kids weren't out of high school yet. We had moved there thinking that they would graduate from there. It was a hard transition. And so in my struggle, I said a similar thing to God that Gideon said to God, and that is, please, sir, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? And where are all these wonderful deeds that God would want, that we felt like we were promised that would happen? And so in my struggle, I really was hit hard by just the lack of concern for our family. I was hit hard by, frankly, just the lack of godly love for us, and the lack of concern for us, and how it was just kind of we were just put out in the cold. And so I remember thinking things will get better when we're out of here, and yet it would still be several years before we were actually out of there. And at one point I remember asking, how could we misjudge so bad? How could we misjudge that this was actually a place for us? How could we not have known and not seen it in the first place, that this would be a bad move, that it would be a bad decision? But in fact, we were both trying to be faithful to those prayers that we had laid out. And so for a while I really felt like, I was praying to God to hold on to me, because I felt like I was losing my faith, like I couldn't do it, and that know, the only way I could come through this is if I felt like my group was gone, but I felt like, God could hold on to me, and He did. And but what happened through that hard and terrible time was that I think we both really grew, and we both really found that there's more, that there's better ways of knowing God's will than to laying out a fleece, and and so we just learned not to rely on that. One of the things I knew was that things would get better